It was 3 in the morning when my phone lit up on the nightstand. I'd been lying awake for the past hour, unable to sleep, my mind running through the presentation I needed to finalize for a client meeting on Thursday. Richard was snoring softly beside me, one arm flung across his side of the bed. 28 years of marriage had taught me the rhythm of his breathing, the way he shifted positions around 2 a.m., the small sounds he made in his sleep. I reached for my phone, expecting maybe an email from one of my overseas clients. The time difference meant Europe was already deep into their workday. The notification said it was a message from Richard. I felt my eyebrows pull together. Why would he be texting me when he was right here, asleep? Maybe he'd queued something earlier, and it just delivered now due to a delay. I unlocked my phone and opened WhatsApp. What I saw made my entire body go cold. It was a screenshot of a conversation. His conversation, with someone saved in his phone as S, with a red heart emoji next to it. My hand started shaking before my brain could fully process what I was reading. The messages were from earlier that evening, around 10 p.m., right after we'd finished dinner, and he'd kissed me goodnight before heading to his study to review some fund reports. "Can't wait to see you Friday night, baby. Told the old lady I have a Boston investors meeting." She bought it? Of course she did. Evelyn's so pathetically trusting it's almost sad. 28 years, and she still thinks I'm the same guy she married. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I kept reading, my thumb scrolling through the conversation captured in his screenshot. Each line felt like a physical blow. How was dinner with her tonight? Tedious as always. She made that salmon thing she's so proud of. Acted like it was gourmet cooking. I smiled and nodded like a good husband while counting down the minutes until I could text you. Poor baby. At least you have Friday to look forward to. Trust me, Friday can't come fast enough. Being with you makes me feel alive again. With her, it's just obligation. Going through the motions with a woman who's desperately trying to stay relevant at 57. I had to press my hand against my mouth to keep from making a sound. The room felt like it was tilting. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of horrible dream. But the phone was solid in my hand, the screen bright in the darkness, and every word was crystal clear. The messages continued. I couldn't stop reading even though each word felt like poison spreading through my veins. Does she suspect anything? Not a chance. Evelyn's too busy with her consulting work to pay attention. She thinks our marriage is solid just because we don't fight. Doesn't realize we don't fight because I checked out emotionally 2 years ago. That's when you met me. Best decision I ever made. You're everything she's not. Young, exciting, actually interested in sex. LOL. Speaking of which, I can't stop thinking about last Tuesday at the apartment. Neither can I. God, the things you do. Evelyn acts like intimacy is some kind of chore she has to endure, like she's doing me a favor. It's pathetic, really. I felt bile rising in my throat. Last Tuesday, when he told me he had a late meeting with a potential investor, when I'd texted him at 9 p.m. asking if he'd eaten, and he said he'd grabbed something quick, when he came home at 11:30 and went straight to shower before climbing into bed beside me. The conversation went on. There were messages about an apartment. His apartment, the one he was paying for. $6,800 a month in Manhattan for her. For his girlfriend. His mistress. While I sat in our home in Greenwich, the home we'd built together, completely oblivious. Then I saw the messages that made everything so much worse. The ones that transformed this from simple infidelity into something calculated and cruel. Babe, I've been thinking about the timeline. For what? For leaving her. I want to be with you full time, but I need to be smart about it financially. What do you mean? We have joint accounts, about $3.2 million sitting there. I've been consulting with my attorney quietly. If I can transfer most of that out before filing for divorce, it'll be harder for her to claim it in the settlement. OMG, you're so smart. When are you thinking? Probably in the next 2 months. I need to do it carefully so she doesn't notice the transfers. Small amounts over time, maybe $200K at a time, into an account she doesn't know about. 2 months. That's so soon. I'm so excited, baby. We can finally be together for real. Just need to play the loving husband for a little while longer. Act like everything's fine. Then once the money's secure, I'll hit her with divorce papers. By the time she realizes what happened, it'll be too late. You're terrible, followed by laughing emojis. I prefer strategic. Evelyn's smart with money. It's literally her job. If she gets wind of this before I'm ready, she'll lock everything down. I've seen her create financial strategies for her clients. She's ruthless when it comes to protecting assets. Can't give her that advantage. What about the kids? Marcus and Isabel are adults. They'll understand eventually. I deserve to be happy, don't I? I've spent nearly 3 decades in a marriage that stopped being fulfilling years ago. Time to live for myself. My vision was blurring with tears, but I kept reading. There were more messages, jokes about our marriage, mocking commentary about the anniversary dinner we'd had last month, where I'd worn the dress I spent 2 weeks finding because I wanted to look special for him. He'd told me I looked beautiful. He'd held my hand across the table at our favorite restaurant. He'd kissed me in the parking lot like we were young again. And apparently, he'd texted her from the bathroom about how the old lady is trying so hard to recapture youth, it's honestly sad to watch. Then, at the very bottom of the screenshot, I saw the message that explained everything. The one he'd sent just minutes ago. Accidentally sent you that screenshot instead of deleting it. Shit, delete it from your end. And her response, already did, baby, don't worry. But he'd sent me the screenshot, not to her, to me, his wife, the woman he'd been systematically betraying and planning to financially destroy. And now, approximately 2 minutes after that last message, I saw new texts coming through in real time, not part of the screenshot. My phone was showing his live conversation with her because I was still looking at our message thread where he'd sent the image. Oh my God, I sent it to Evelyn, not you. I sent the screenshot to Evelyn. What? Fuck. I meant to send it to you to show you what I was planning to delete, but I clicked her name instead. They're both E's in my recent messages. Is she awake? Did she see it? I don't know. She's in bed next to me. Phone is on her nightstand. Please God, let her be asleep. What are you going to do? I don't know. Maybe she won't check her phone until morning. Maybe I can delete it remotely somehow. Fuck. I need to think. I looked over at Richard. He was awake now, I could tell by his breathing. But he was lying perfectly still, his back to me, clearly hoping I was asleep, hoping his catastrophic mistake hadn't been discovered yet, buying himself time to figure out damage control. Something inside me shifted in that moment. Not broke. That would imply weakness, fragility. No. Something hardened, crystallized, became diamond sharp and unbreakable. I took screenshots of everything. The original image he sent. The entire conversation with S heart emoji that I could see. The panicked messages about sending it to the wrong person. I backed everything up to 3 different cloud services. I texted the screenshots to my personal email, my work email, and to a private folder I created on the spot. Then I did something that surprised even myself. I opened a new message thread with my best friend Diana and sent her everything with just 4 words. Call me at 8. Diana Rothschild, divorce attorney, specialist in high net worth separations, the most ruthless legal mind I'd ever encountered. She'd been my best friend for 20 years. We had lunch every Tuesday. She'd told me countless stories about her cases, about cheating spouses who thought they were clever, about hidden assets and strategic divorces, and women who'd been blindsided by husbands they trusted. She'd once said to me, over wine on her terrace overlooking Central Park, "Evelyn, you're lucky you have a solid marriage. Most of the men I deal with are absolute snakes." I'd agreed with her, feeling grateful, feeling secure. I'd been so stupidly, pathetically wrong. I set my phone back on the nightstand, screen down, exactly as it had been. I controlled my breathing, counted to 4 on the inhale, held for 4, exhaled for 4. An old technique from my corporate days when I had to present to hostile boards. I'd learned to master my physical reactions a long time ago. That skill was about to become very useful. Richard shifted beside me, rolled over slightly. I could feel him testing whether I was awake, whether he'd been caught. I kept my breathing deep and even, mimicking sleep. After several long minutes, I heard him slowly ease out of bed. He picked up his phone from the charging cable and moved silently toward the bathroom. The door closed with barely a sound. Immediately, I heard the muffled sound of panicked whispering. He was calling her, probably from the bathroom, trying to figure out his next move. I lay there in the darkness, my mind working with a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. 28 years of marriage, 2 children, a life built together from the ground up. I'd sacrificed a CEO position 15 years ago to maintain family stability when Marcus and Isabel were in middle school. Richard had supported the decision, told me family came first, told me we were a team, all while apparently resenting my success, apparently planning my financial destruction, apparently mocking me to a woman 23 years younger, Sienna Calloway. That had to be who S was. I ran through my memory. Richard had mentioned that name, a marketing manager at Davidson Corp., one of his fund's client companies. Young, ambitious, always at the quarterly meetings. I'd met her once, briefly, at a holiday party 2 years ago. She'd smiled at me, shaken my hand, complimented my bracelet, and apparently started sleeping with my husband shortly after. The bathroom door opened. Richard crept back to bed, moving carefully, clearly convinced I was still asleep. He lay down, but I could feel the tension radiating from his body. He wasn't sleeping. He was panicking, lying in the dark beside his wife, wondering if his entire carefully constructed double life was about to detonate. Good. Let him panic. I had 3 hours until Diana would see my message. 3 hours to plan. 3 hours to transform from the trusting wife Richard had taken for granted into someone he'd never seen before. Someone he'd clearly forgotten existed under the pleasant domestic surface of our marriage. Because here's what Richard didn't know. What he'd apparently forgotten in his arrogance. I hadn't built an $8.7 million personal portfolio by being weak. I hadn't become one of the most respected financial consultants in Greenwich by being naive. I hadn't spent 30 years in the brutal world of corporate finance and wealth management by being someone who could be easily destroyed. Richard wanted to play strategic games with our money. He'd picked the absolute worst opponent imaginable. Every single financial move he'd mentioned in those messages to his mistress, the slow transfers, the hidden accounts, the careful timing, I'd literally taught those exact techniques to my clients. I knew every variation, every loophole, every counter-strategy. I'd built defensive financial structures for dozens of women who suspected their husbands of exactly what mine was doing. And now, I was going to use every single piece of that knowledge to protect myself. No, not just protect. That was defensive thinking. Richard had declared war. He just didn't know the battle had already started, and he definitely didn't know he'd already lost. The clock on the nightstand ticked toward 4 a.m. Beside me, Richard's breathing finally evened out. Sleep, or a decent imitation of it. He probably thought he'd bought himself some time, thought he could get up in the morning, check my phone somehow, maybe delete the message remotely, maybe claim it was a hack or a joke if I'd seen it. He had no idea I'd already backed up everything 6 different ways. He had no idea Diana would be calling me in 4 hours. He had no idea that by this time tomorrow, every joint account we had would be legally frozen by emergency court order that Diana would help me file. He had no idea that I'd already mentally cataloged every single asset, every account, every investment, every property deed, and every financial thread that connected us. I closed my eyes, but I wasn't sleeping. I was planning. And somewhere in my chest, underneath the pain and betrayal and shock, something cold and sharp was growing, something that felt almost like anticipation. Richard wanted to see me beg, wanted to strip me of resources and dignity, wanted to leave me scrambling while he started fresh with his young girlfriend in the apartment I didn't even know existed until tonight. He was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. You don't try to financially destroy someone who spent 3 decades becoming an expert at protecting money. You definitely don't do it after accidentally handing her a complete roadmap of your entire strategy. I felt something that might have been a smile cross my face there in the darkness. Richard thought he was strategic. Richard thought he was smart. Richard thought he was 3 steps ahead. Richard was about to discover exactly how wrong he was. And by the time I was done, he'd be on his knees begging for mercy he didn't deserve and wasn't going to receive. But first, I needed to get through the next few hours, play the role perfectly, let him think his secret was still safe, let him believe he still had the advantage. Because the best strategies always started with your opponent underestimating you. And Richard had been underestimating me for years. Time to make him pay for that mistake. I met Richard Whitmore 30 years ago at a networking event in Manhattan. I was 27, a junior financial analyst at Morgan Chase, hungry to prove myself in a world dominated by men in expensive suits who thought women belonged in support roles, not making million-dollar investment decisions. Richard was 30, already a rising star at Wellington Fund Management, with the kind of confidence that came from old money and Ivy League connections. He approached me at the bar, introduced himself, and instead of the typical patronizing comments I'd grown used to, he asked intelligent questions about a market analysis I'd published the previous month. We talked for 2 hours. He was charming, genuinely interested, and when he asked for my number, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope, maybe, or possibility. We dated for 18 months before he proposed. The wedding was elegant, understated, exactly what we both wanted. His family had money, real old Connecticut money, but Richard never flaunted it. My father, a financial executive himself, approved completely. "That young man has a solid head on his shoulders," he told me the night before the wedding. "You've chosen well, Evelyn." I thought I had. God, I really thought I had. The early years were good. Better than good. We bought the house in Greenwich when I was 31. Richard was making excellent money managing funds, and I was climbing steadily at Morgan Chase, building a reputation for creating innovative investment strategies for high-net-worth clients. We talked about everything: shared goals, shared dreams, shared ambitions. Marcus was born when I was 33. Isabel followed 3 years later. I took minimal maternity leave both times, determined not to lose momentum in my career. Richard supported it, or seemed to. He'd tell people his wife was brilliant, that our kids were lucky to have such a strong role model. Looking back now, I wonder when that pride curdled into resentment. I made partner at Morgan Chase when Marcus was 7. It was the culmination of years of brutal hours, political navigation, and proving myself twice as competent as my male colleagues just to be considered half as good. The celebration dinner was perfect. Richard ordered champagne, gave a toast about his extraordinary wife, kissed me in front of everyone. 2 weeks later, he made a comment over breakfast about how I'd been working late a lot. Nothing accusatory, just an observation. But something in his tone made me defensive. "You work late too," I'd said. "I know. I'm not criticizing, just saying the kids notice." That tiny seed of guilt he planted. I didn't recognize it then for what it was: manipulation disguised as concern. When Marcus was 12 and Isabel was 9, I got offered the position of a lifetime: Chief Investment Officer at Blackstone. It would mean longer hours, more travel, significantly more pressure, but also a 7-figure salary and a chance to operate at the absolute highest level of financial strategy. Richard and I discussed it over wine on our back terrace, watching the sunset. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to take it. This is everything I've worked toward." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What about the kids? They're at crucial ages. Middle school is tough, They need stability. They have stability. We have stability. Do we? Evelyn, I'm barely home myself. If we're both working those kinds of hours, who's actually raising Marcus and Isabel? The guilt hit harder that time. I thought about Marcus struggling with algebra, coming to me for help, and finding me distracted by a client presentation. I thought about Isabel's school play that I'd almost missed because of a meeting in Boston. What are you saying? I asked. I'm saying maybe this isn't the right time. Maybe in a few years when they're older. I turned down the position, told Blackstone I was honored but needed to prioritize family. Instead, I transitioned to independent consulting, building my own client base, working from a home office. It gave me flexibility with the kids' schedules while still utilizing my expertise. Richard said he was proud of me for making the sacrifice, said it showed what kind of mother I was. I built my consulting business into something remarkable over the next 15 years, specialized in protecting assets for high-net-worth individuals, particularly women going through divorces or worried about financial security. I created strategies so sophisticated that several law firms kept me on retainer. My personal portfolio grew to $8.7 million through careful investments and the substantial fees I commanded. Richard's career flourished too. He became a senior fund manager, then a partner, managing billions in client assets. We became the couple everyone envied. Beautiful home, successful careers, well-adjusted children. We hosted dinner parties. We attended charity galas. We took family vacations to Europe every summer. And apparently, somewhere in all of that success and stability, Richard decided I was no longer enough. I tried to remember when things shifted. When did he stop really seeing me? 2 years ago, he said in those messages, when he met her. But had he already checked out before that? Were there signs I missed because I was too busy trusting him? There were small things now that I was replaying our marriage through this new, horrifying lens. The way he'd started going to the gym more obsessively about 3 years ago. Hiring a personal trainer, buying expensive workout clothes, suddenly caring about his appearance in a way he hadn't since his 30s. I'd thought it was healthy. Midlife commitment to fitness. Now I wondered if he'd been preparing to attract someone younger. The phone calls he'd take in his study with the door closed. Just work stuff, boring fun business, he'd say when I asked. I'd believed him because, why wouldn't I? We didn't have the kind of marriage where you questioned every private conversation. Except, apparently we did. I just didn't know it. The business trips that seemed to increase over the past 2 years. Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, sometimes just overnight. He'd come home with stories about investor meetings, portfolio reviews, strategic planning sessions. Meanwhile, he was maintaining an apartment in Manhattan for his girlfriend. $6,800 a month. That money was coming from somewhere. I made a mental note to pull every financial record I could access. I needed to see exactly how long he'd been funding this double life. Our anniversary dinner last month kept playing in my mind. 28 years. We'd gone to the Capitol Grill in Stamford, our traditional spot for special occasions. I'd worn a deep blue dress that I'd found after searching through 3 different boutiques. I wanted to look special, wanted to feel beautiful for him. Richard had picked me up and spun me around in our bedroom before we left. You look stunning, he'd said. How did I get so lucky? I'd felt warm, loved, secure. At the restaurant, we talked about maybe taking a trip to Italy in the fall. Just the 2 of us, now that the kids were adults living their own lives. He'd held my hand across the table. We'd shared tiramisu for dessert, 2 forks like we'd done since our first anniversary. And he'd gone to the bathroom at one point during dinner, been gone maybe 7-8 minutes, long enough to text his mistress about how pathetic I looked trying to recapture youth, long enough to mock the effort I'd put into looking nice for him, long enough to turn what I thought was a beautiful evening into material for his entertainment with another woman. The betrayal felt like it had physical weight, like something pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. But I couldn't afford to drown in that feeling. Not now. Now I needed to channel everything into cold, strategic thinking. I thought about my father, who'd passed away 5 years ago. He'd been a vice president at Goldman Sachs, one of the toughest negotiators in the business. He'd taught me that emotion was fine in private, but in battle, you needed ice in your veins. Never let them see you hurt, Evelyn, he'd told me when I was facing down a particularly vicious colleague trying to steal credit for my work. Hurt makes you vulnerable. Save the tears for later. Right now, destroy them with precision. I'd followed that advice my entire career. Time to apply it to my personal life. Diana would call at 8. That gave me 4 hours to prepare. I needed to organize my thoughts, catalog every piece of information I had, and start building the framework of my counter-strategy. Richard thought he had 2 months to slowly drain our joint accounts. He was about to discover he had exactly 0 minutes. I also needed to figure out how to act when morning came. Richard would be watching me carefully, trying to determine if I'd seen his message. I needed to play it perfectly. Not too normal, that might seem suspicious, but not angry or cold either. Just another ordinary Wednesday morning in what he thought was his safely deceptive marriage. The challenge was going to be looking him in the face without showing the disgust I felt, without letting him see that I knew every cruel thing he'd said about me, every mocking comment, every plan to financially devastate me. I'd spent 28 years loving this man, building a life with him, and he'd spent at least 2 of those years actively working to destroy me. Marcus was going to be devastated. He'd always looked up to his father, though they'd had their disagreements over the years. Marcus had his own strong sense of ethics, something he'd inherited from my father. This betrayal would hit him hard. But at least he was an attorney. He'd understand the legal implications immediately. He might even be able to help, though I wouldn't ask unless necessary. This was my battle to fight. Isabel would be hurt in a different way. She was more emotional, more willing to see nuance and complexity. She'd probably try to understand her father's perspective, try to find some way to maintain a relationship with him despite what he'd done. That was just who she was. But I hoped she'd stand with me when it mattered. The clock showed 5:47 a.m. In a little over 2 hours, Richard's alarm would go off. He'd get up, shower, dress for work, come down for breakfast. We'd have coffee together like we did every morning. He'd probably kiss me goodbye, tell me to have a good day, maintain the facade of devoted husband. And I'd smile and return the kiss and watch him leave, all while knowing exactly what kind of man he really was. Then Diana would call, and the real work would begin. By the time Richard came home tomorrow evening, his entire world would have shifted in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Every financial advantage he thought he had would be gone. Every careful plan would be in ruins, and he still wouldn't know I was the one who dismantled everything. I lay there in the darkness, listening to Richard's breathing, feeling the weight of our shared history pressing down on me. 28 years, 2 children, thousands of shared meals, shared conversations, shared moments, all of it real for me. How much of it had been real for him? It didn't matter now. What mattered was winning. And I was very, very good at winning. Richard's alarm went off at 7:30, just like it did every weekday morning. I heard him shift, reach over to silence it, then pause. I could feel him looking at me, trying to determine if I was awake. I kept my breathing steady and deep, eyes closed, the perfect picture of someone still sleeping. After a long moment, he carefully got out of bed and headed to the bathroom. I opened my eyes the second the door closed. My phone showed 3 messages from Diana, all sent in the past 15 minutes. Got your screenshots. Holy shit, Evelyn. Call me the second you're alone. I'm clearing my entire morning. We have work to do. I texted back quickly. He's in the shower. Call you in 20 minutes. I got up, pulled on my robe, and went downstairs to start coffee. My hands were steady as I measured the grounds, filled the water reservoir, pressed the button to start the brew cycle. Normal morning routine. Nothing different. I could hear the shower running upstairs, pictured Richard standing under the hot water, probably still trying to figure out if his midnight mistake had been discovered. By the time he came downstairs 20 minutes later, dressed in one of his tailored suits, hair still damp, I was sitting at the kitchen island with my coffee and the Wall Street Journal open in front of me. I looked up and smiled. "Good morning," I said, keeping my voice warm and easy. "Coffee's fresh." His relief was almost comical. His shoulders dropped about 2 inches, tension visibly leaving his body. "Morning, sweetheart. Thanks." He poured himself a cup and came to stand across the island from me. "Sleep well?" "Like a rock," I lied smoothly. "You?" "Yeah, great." Another lie. We were a couple of accomplished liars now, apparently. The difference was I knew the game we were playing. He still thought he was getting away with something. He checked his phone, probably looking to see if I'd opened his message from last night. WhatsApp showed 2 blue check marks, message delivered and read at 3:04 a.m. I watched him relax even more. His wife had seen a message from him in the middle of the night and hadn't said anything. Must not have opened the attachment. Crisis averted. "Big day today?" I asked, taking a sip of my coffee. "Just the usual. Few client calls, portfolio reviews. You?" "Conference call with the Henderson account at 10. Otherwise pretty light. Might go into the city for lunch with Diana, actually. We haven't caught up in a couple weeks." "That's nice. Tell her I said hello." He glanced at his watch. "I should get going. Traffic's going to be terrible." He came around the island, kissed my cheek, exactly like he did every morning. I returned the kiss, even put my hand on his arm affectionately. Playing the role perfectly. His relief was palpable. His wife was still the trusting, clueless woman he thought she was. Everything was fine. "Have a good day," I told him. "You too, sweetheart. Love you." "Love you too." The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I said them with a smile. I watched him grab his briefcase and keys, watched him walk out the door to the garage, heard his Mercedes start up and pull away. Only when the sound of his car had completely faded did I let my smile drop. I called Diana immediately. She answered on the first ring. "Evelyn, tell me everything." For the next 45 minutes, I walked her through every detail. The screenshots, the messages, the apartment, the planned financial betrayal. Diana listened without interrupting, which I knew meant she was in full attorney mode, processing and strategizing. When I finished, she was quiet for maybe 10 seconds. Then, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, I'm calling in a favor with Judge Morrison. We've worked together on 3 cases, and she owes me. I can get an emergency hearing this afternoon for a temporary restraining order on all joint accounts." "That fast?" "With evidence of planned financial malfeasance? Absolutely. He literally documented his intention to drain your joint assets before filing for divorce. That's textbook financial abuse. Any judge will freeze those accounts immediately to prevent exactly what he's planning." Relief hit me so hard I had to sit down. "What else?" "We need to document everything he's been spending on the Mistress. That apartment alone is over $80,000 a year. If he's using joint funds or any money that could be considered marital assets, that's dissipation of marital property. We can make him pay back every penny in the divorce settlement. He has to be using his own money for it. We keep separate accounts for personal spending." "Maybe, but I'd bet serious money he's been creative with how he categorizes certain expenses. We need to subpoena his financial records going back at least 2 years. Credit cards, bank statements, everything. I have access to some of that. Joint accounts, joint credit cards. Pull everything you can access legally right now. Every statement, every transaction. I'll file for comprehensive discovery on the rest." "And Evelyn?" Her voice softened slightly. "How are you holding up?" The question almost broke through my careful control. I'm furious, I'm hurt, I'm humiliated. But right now, I'm channeling all of that into making sure he doesn't destroy me the way he planned. Good. Use that. We're going to take him apart piece by piece, and we're going to do it so perfectly that he won't even see it coming until it's done. She paused. Do you want to tell Marcus and Isabel? Not yet. Not until I have everything locked down. They don't need to be in the middle of this until absolutely necessary. Agreed. Okay, I'm going to make some calls. Can you meet me at my office at 2 o'clock? That should give me time to prep the emergency filing and get us on Judge Morrison's calendar. I'll be there. Evelyn? This is going to get ugly. He's not going to take this lying down once he realizes what's happening. I know. I'm ready. I believe you. See you at 2. I hung up and sat there for a moment, feeling the weight of what I was about to set in motion. This was real. I was actually doing this. Ending my marriage. Going to war with the man I'd spent 28 years of my life with. Then I thought about those messages. About him calling me pathetic. About him planning to rob me. About him mocking our anniversary dinner to his mistress. The weight transformed into resolve, hard and cold. I spent the next 3 hours systematically gathering evidence. I downloaded every joint account statement going back 5 years, every joint credit card transaction. I accessed our shared investment portfolios and took screenshots of every holding, every balance, every transaction history. I pulled up property deeds, insurance policies, retirement accounts, everything. I also did something else. I hired a private investigator. Diana had recommended him years ago for another client, and she'd raved about his thoroughness. His name was James Chen, and his rates were expensive, but he was apparently worth every penny. He answered my call immediately. Chen Investigations. Mr. Chen, my name is Evelyn Whitmore. Diana Rothschild recommended you. Mrs. Whitmore. Diana called me about 20 minutes ago and gave me a heads up you'd be reaching out. I understand you need comprehensive surveillance and background work. On my husband, yes, and his mistress. I'll need names, addresses, places of employment, vehicle information, and any other details you can provide. I gave him everything I knew. Richard's work schedule, his usual routes, his gym membership, Sienna Calloway's name, her employer, the apartment address I'd found in the messages. I need to know everything. How long the affair has been going on, where they meet, how often, what he's spending on her. Everything. Understood. I can have preliminary findings for you within 48 hours, comprehensive report within a week. My retainer is $10,000, and the full investigation will likely run between $30,000 and $50,000, depending on how deep we need to go. Money isn't an issue. I want thoroughness. You'll get it. I'll send over the contract within the hour. At 1:30, I drove into Manhattan to Diana's office. Her firm occupied 3 floors of a building in Midtown, all glass and steel and expensive art. Her personal office overlooked Central Park, a space that had always felt powerful and intimidating. Today it felt like a war room. Diana was behind her desk with files and papers spread everywhere. She looked up when I entered. Evelyn, sit. We have a lot to cover before we see the judge. For the next 30 minutes, she walked me through the legal strategy. Emergency restraining order on joint accounts first, preventing any transfers or withdrawals by either party without court approval. Then, a formal filing for legal separation, citing irreconcilable differences and financial misconduct. Comprehensive discovery demands for all of Richard's financial records. And finally, the strategic piece that made Diana smile like a shark. His fund has a strict ethics policy, she said. I pulled it this morning. Any personal relationship with representatives of client companies must be disclosed to the board immediately. Failure to disclose is grounds for termination and possible legal action if it compromises fiduciary duty. He never disclosed it. Exactly, which means we have leverage. He can resign quietly before we expose the violation, or we can make it public and destroy his entire career. Most men in his position choose quiet resignation. I want him to understand what he was about to do to me, I said quietly. Oh, he will. By the time we're done, Richard Whitmore is going to regret every decision he made over the past 2 years. The hearing with Judge Morrison was swift and clinical. Diana presented the evidence, screenshots of Richard's messages documenting his plan to drain joint accounts, the apartment he was maintaining for another woman, the clear statement of intent to hide assets before filing for divorce. Judge Morrison, a severe-looking woman in her 60s, reviewed everything with sharp eyes. "Mrs. Whitmore, you're requesting an immediate freeze on all joint accounts pending full divorce proceedings?" "Yes, Your Honor," Diana answered. "My client has documented evidence that her husband is actively planning financial malfeasance. The messages clearly state his intention to transfer funds out of joint accounts before she's aware divorce proceedings have begun." "I've seen enough. Motion granted. All joint accounts are hereby frozen effective immediately. Neither party may make withdrawals or transfers without express court approval. I'm also ordering full financial discovery on Mr. Whitmore. All accounts, all credit cards, all assets must be disclosed within 30 days. She looked at me directly. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm sorry you're going through this, but you've taken exactly the right steps to protect yourself." "Thank you, Your Honor." We left the courthouse at 4:15 p.m. Diana turned to me on the steps. "The banks will be notified within the hour. Richard will probably discover the freeze when he tries to access an account or gets an email notification. Are you prepared for that phone call?" "What should I say?" "As little as possible. He'll be furious, probably panicked. Don't engage. Just tell him to have his attorney contact me. Don't explain. Don't justify. Don't argue. Make him understand that everything goes through lawyers now. Okay? And Evelyn, you're doing great. You're stronger than you think you are." I drove back to Greenwich feeling numb and wired at the same time. The house felt different when I walked in, emptier. Or maybe I was just seeing it clearly for the first time in years. This wasn't a happy home. It was a stage set where Richard had been performing the role of devoted husband while plotting my destruction. The phone call came at 6:47 p.m. Richard's name lit up my screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Evelyn, what the hell did you do?" His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "I protected myself." "Protected yourself? You froze our accounts. I just got notification from the bank that I can't access anything." "That's correct. You can't do this. That's my money too. And it's my money too, which is why neither of us can touch it until the court sorts out exactly what belongs to whom." Silence. Then, more carefully, "What are you talking about? What court?" "I filed for legal separation this afternoon. Diana Rothschild is representing me. Have your attorney contact her with any questions." "Diana? Your friend Diana?" He sounded shocked, like he couldn't believe I'd taken such a decisive step. "Evelyn, what is going on? Can we talk about this?" "There's nothing to talk about, Richard. Like hell there isn't. You can't just freeze all our money and file for separation without even discussing it with me first." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Actually, I can, much like you could plan to drain those same accounts without discussing it with me first." Dead silence. I could practically hear him trying to figure out what I knew and how I knew it. "I don't know what you're talking about," he finally said. "Yes, you do. But we're not having this conversation. Everything goes through attorneys now. Diana will be in touch." "Evelyn, wait." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I'd done it. I'd stood my ground. I'd refused to be drawn into his manipulations or his lies. He called back immediately. I declined the call. He called again, declined again. Then the texts started. "We need to talk about this. You're making a huge mistake. I don't understand why you're doing this. At least give me a chance to explain." "Explain what? That he was planning to rob me blind? That he'd been sleeping with someone else for 2 years? That he'd mocked our marriage to his mistress?" I blocked his number. At 8 p.m., my phone rang with an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is Sienna Calloway." My entire body went rigid. "How did you get this number?" "Richard gave it to me." "Look, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "There's been no misunderstanding. Don't contact me again." "Please, just listen for a second. Richard told me you two were separated. He said it was amicable, that you were already living separate lives. That divorce was just a formality. And you believed him? Why wouldn't I? He seemed— Don't call me again, Miss Calloway, and you should know that every dollar my husband spent on you will be repaid in our divorce settlement. That apartment? Those dinners? Whatever gifts he gave you? All of it. I hope you enjoyed spending my family's money. I hung up before she could respond. My heart was pounding. I felt violated that she'd called me, angry that Richard had given her my private number, disgusted that she'd tried to pretend she didn't know exactly what she was doing. Another text came through, this time from Marcus. Mom, Dad just called me really upset. Says you froze his bank accounts? What's going on? I stared at the message. Richard was already trying to control the narrative with our children, already positioning himself as the victim. I couldn't let that stand. I called Marcus instead of texting back. He answered immediately. Mom, what's happening? Marcus, I need you to listen carefully. Your father has been having an affair for at least 2 years. I discovered it last night. He's been planning to drain our joint accounts before filing for divorce. I filed for legal separation today and got a court order freezing our joint assets to protect myself. Silence on the other end. Then, are you serious? An affair? I have extensive documentation, screenshots, messages, evidence of an apartment he's been paying for in Manhattan for his girlfriend. Jesus. His voice sounded hollow. Mom, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? I'm managing. Diana Rothschild is representing me. Diana's the best. Good. Another pause. What do you need from me? Right now, nothing. Just know that whatever your father tells you, I have proof of everything. And Marcus? I'm going to be fine. Better than fine. I believe you. Listen, Isabel should know too. Want me to tell her? No, I'll call her. Thanks, honey. Love you, Mom. Let me know if there's anything I can do. The call with Isabel was harder. She cried, asked questions I couldn't fully answer yet, said she couldn't believe Dad would do something like this. I kept my voice steady and factual, gave her the basic information, told her I loved her. When we hung up, I felt exhausted. It was almost 10 p.m. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the back terrace, looking out at the dark yard. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Richard, now from different numbers. I'd blocked them all. Diana texted, How are you holding up? Surviving. He called repeatedly. I didn't engage. Perfect. His attorney will reach out tomorrow. Be prepared for him to try to paint you as unreasonable and vindictive. Let him try. That's my girl. Get some rest. Tomorrow starts the real work. I sat there for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. Yesterday morning, I'd been a wife in what I thought was a solid marriage. Tonight, I was a woman fighting for her financial survival against a husband who'd proven he was willing to destroy me. But I wasn't the one who'd been destroyed. Richard was about to learn that lesson the hard way. James Chen called me 3 days later at 9 a.m. on Friday morning. His voice was professionally neutral, but I could hear something underneath. Satisfaction, maybe. Or vindication. Mrs. Whitmore, I have your preliminary report. Are you somewhere you can talk privately? I was in my home office, door closed. Yes, go ahead. I've documented 14 separate meetings between your husband and Miss Calloway over the past 72 hours. They're clearly aware something has happened based on their behavior. Yesterday, I observed them having what appeared to be a very intense argument outside her apartment building. Your husband seemed agitated. She was crying. What else? The financial trail is extensive. Going back 26 months, I've found evidence of over $240,000 spent on Miss Calloway. Apartment rent, furnishings, clothing, jewelry, trips. There's a particularly notable charge for $18,000 at Tiffany's last Valentine's Day. Everything was paid through a corporate credit card registered to your husband's fund management company. I felt my stomach drop. Corporate card? Not personal? Correct. He was categorizing the expenses as client entertainment and business development. I've documented approximately 60% of the spending this way. The other 40% came from a personal account in his name only, but given the amounts and the timing, a forensic accountant would easily argue those funds were derived from marital assets that should have been shared. This was bigger than I'd thought. He was using company money to fund his affair? It appears so. And Mrs. Whitmore, there's something else. Something I think changes your entire situation. What is it? Davidson Corp., Miss Calloway's employer, is one of your husband's fund's largest clients. They have approximately $80 million under management with Wellington Fund Management. I pulled corporate records and found that Miss Calloway sits on the internal investment committee that makes decisions about their fund allocations. The implications hit me immediately. He was having an affair with someone who had direct influence over whether her company continued investing with his fund. Exactly. That's not just an ethics violation. Depending on how it's structured, it could be securities fraud. If he was receiving favorable treatment from Davidson Corp. Because of his personal relationship with Miss Calloway, that's a breach of fiduciary duty that could result in criminal charges, not just termination. I sat down heavily. This was so much worse than Richard being a cheating husband. This was potential criminal behavior. What do you recommend? I recommend you share this information with your attorney immediately. This gives you tremendous leverage. Your husband won't just lose his marriage if this comes out. He'll lose his career, possibly his freedom. Send me everything you have. I'll have the full preliminary report to you within the hour. I'm continuing surveillance and digging deeper into the financial records. There may be more. After he hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen. Richard hadn't just betrayed me personally. He'd risked his entire professional reputation, possibly committed actual crimes, all for a woman 23 years younger than me. I forwarded Chen's report to Diana the moment it arrived. She called me within 10 minutes. Evelyn, this is a game changer. I know. With this, we can do more than just protect your assets. We can make him pay for everything he's done. But I need to know what you want. Scorched earth or a strategic victory? I thought about those messages, about him calling me pathetic, about him planning to rob me, about him risking everything, our family, our finances, his career, because he thought he deserved something more exciting than the wife who'd stood by him for 28 years. I want him to understand the magnitude of what he's done, I said quietly. I want consequences that match the betrayal, but I don't want to go to prison myself for revenge. I want clean, legal, devastating justice. Then here's what we do. We present him with an ultimatum. He signs a divorce settlement with terms we dictate, significant financial compensation for you, full disclosure of all assets, acknowledgement of fault, or we present this evidence to the SEC and to Wellington's board of directors. Will that work? Evelyn, he'll have no choice. The alternative is career destruction and possible criminal prosecution. Most men in his position would sign anything to avoid that. When do we do this? I'll set up a meeting for Monday. 4-party conference. You, me, Richard, and whatever attorney he's hired. We lay it all out. Make the offer. Give him 48 hours to decide. And if he refuses? Then we burn his world down and watch him try to rebuild from the ashes. But he won't refuse. He's too smart for that. Or at least, he's smart enough to know when he's lost. That weekend was strange. I stayed in the house in Greenwich, my house really, since my name was on the deed alongside Richard's, and I had no intention of leaving. Richard was staying somewhere else, a hotel, I assumed, though I didn't ask and didn't care. Marcus came over on Saturday, brought lunch from my favorite Italian place, sat with me on the terrace while I told him everything. So Dad was committing actual fraud, he said, looking stunned. Possibly, at minimum, serious ethics violations. At worst, securities fraud. Jesus, Mom, what are you going to do? Give him a chance to settle this quietly and fairly. If he doesn't take it, Diana will file complaints with the SEC and his company's board. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, he did this to himself. You know that, right? None of this is your fault. I know, but it still feels like my marriage ending, my life falling apart. It's not falling apart. You're rebuilding it on honest ground instead of the lies Dad built. That's not falling apart. That's getting stronger. I wanted to believe him. Some days I almost did. Sunday evening, Diana texted me the details. Monday, 2 p.m., my conference room. Richard's attorney is Bradford Mills. Corporate guy, smart but not a family law specialist. That's to our advantage. Be prepared for Richard to be hostile. Don't engage. Stay calm. Let me do the talking. Monday afternoon, I dressed carefully. Navy suit, simple jewelry, professional and composed. I wanted to look like the financially sophisticated woman I was, not a wronged wife falling apart. Diana met me in the lobby of her building. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be. We rode the elevator up together. When we walked into the conference room, Richard was already there with his attorney. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, suit rumpled, the confident facade completely gone. When he saw me, something flashed across his face. Pain, maybe, or guilt. I felt nothing but cold determination. Bradford Mills stood up, extended his hand. Mrs. Whitmore, Bradford Mills, I'm representing Mr. Whitmore in this matter. I shook his hand without smiling. Mr. Mills? We all sat down. Diana pulled out a folder, placed it on the table between us. Gentlemen, thank you for meeting with us. I'm going to be direct because there's no point in dancing around this. We have extensive evidence of Mr. Whitmore's affair with Miss Sienna Calloway, including documentation of over $240,000 spent on her over the past 26 months. More importantly, we have evidence that approximately 60% of that money was spent using corporate funds from Wellington Fund Management, categorized falsely as business expenses. Bradford Mills's face went pale. Richard's jaw clenched. Diana continued. We also have evidence that Miss Calloway sits on the investment committee at Davidson Corp., a major client of Mr. Whitmore's fund. The personal relationship between Mr. Whitmore and Miss Calloway, combined with the financial arrangements and the business relationship, constitutes a serious breach of fiduciary duty and possible securities fraud. Now wait just a minute, Bradford started. Diana held up her hand. I'm not finished. We have a choice to make here. We can take this evidence to the SEC, to Wellington's board, and to the media, or we can resolve this privately with a divorce settlement that reflects the severity of Mr. Whitmore's misconduct. The choice is his. She slid the folder across the table. Those are our terms. He has 48 hours to accept. If he refuses, we file complaints Tuesday morning. Richard looked at me for the first time since we'd sat down. Evelyn, please. Can we talk about this privately? I met his eyes and felt nothing but ice. No, Richard, we can't. Bradford Mills opened the folder with shaking hands. I watched him read through the first page, then the second, his expression growing more disturbed with each line. Richard sat frozen beside him, staring at the table. The silence in that conference room was thick and suffocating. Finally, Bradford looked up. May my client and I have a few minutes to discuss this privately? Of course, Diana said smoothly. We'll step outside. You have 15 minutes. We left them there and walked down the hall to Diana's office. She closed the door behind us and turned to me with something like pride in her eyes. You're handling this perfectly, Evelyn. Completely composed. He expected you to be emotional and exploitable. Instead, you're showing him exactly what kind of woman he tried to destroy. I don't feel composed, I admitted. I feel like I'm barely holding it together. That's the difference between you and him. You know how to function when things fall apart. He's discovering he doesn't. She checked her watch. They're going to try to negotiate. Bradford will push back on some of the terms, but the core of it, he has to accept. The alternative is too catastrophic. What are the chances he just signs? Honestly, 60%. The other 40% is him trying to bargain his way into something less humiliating. But either way, you've won. The only question is how much he has to lose before he admits it. 15 minutes later, we returned to the conference room. Bradford looked like he'd aged 5 years. Richard looked worse. His hands were clasped together on the table, knuckles white, jaw so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Bradford spoke first. Mrs. Whitmore, my client acknowledges that mistakes were made. Mistakes? I heard my own voice, cold and sharp. He planned to rob me blind, Bradford. He mocked our marriage to his mistress. He used company funds to maintain an affair with someone who had direct influence over his client relationships. Those aren't mistakes. Those are calculated decisions. Evelyn, please, Richard started. You don't get to call me that anymore, I said, cutting him off. You lost that privilege when you called me pathetic to your girlfriend. He flinched like I'd slapped him. Good. I wanted him to feel every word. Bradford cleared his throat. My client is willing to agree to the divorce and to a fair financial settlement. However, some of the terms you've outlined are simply too aggressive. Then we file with the SEC on Wednesday morning, Diana said flatly. Your choice. You can't be serious. You'd destroy his entire career over a divorce settlement? He was planning to destroy my client's financial security, Diana replied. Turnabout is fair play, except we're giving him an option. He didn't give her one. Bradford looked at Richard. Whatever he saw there made him sigh heavily. What exactly are you asking for? Diana pulled out another document. Mr. Whitmore will agree to a divorce settlement where Mrs. Whitmore retains 100% of her personal assets, currently valued at $8.7 million, plus $2 million from his accounts as compensation for dissipation of marital assets through his affair. He will repay all funds spent on Miss Calloway that came from corporate accounts. He will resign from Wellington Fund Management voluntarily before any ethics violations are reported. He will sign a 3-year non-compete agreement preventing him from working at competing financial institutions, and he will provide a written statement to Marcus and Isabel Whitmore taking full responsibility for the destruction of his marriage and family. That's insane, Bradford said. You're asking him to give up his career, his reputation, and $2 million? We're asking him to face consequences for his actions, I said. The alternative is we take this public and he loses everything anyway, except without any control over the narrative. Richard finally spoke, his voice hoarse. What about the house? The house stays with me, I said. It's my home. You chose to leave it when you rented an apartment for your mistress. I helped pay for that house. And you helped destroy our marriage. You don't get to live in the house while I'm forced to move because of what you did. He looked at me, and I saw something break behind his eyes. Maybe the realization that he'd actually lost, that the wife he'd been planning to manipulate and cheat was now dictating terms to him, that every careful plan he'd made had collapsed because of one stupid mistake sending a screenshot to the wrong person. If I sign this, he said slowly, the SEC investigation doesn't happen? My career doesn't get destroyed publicly? If you sign this and comply with every term, we keep the evidence private, Diana confirmed. You can resign quietly, cite personal reasons, or a desire for a career change. Your professional reputation takes a hit but doesn't get obliterated. Your choice. Bradford leaned over and whispered urgently to Richard for several minutes. I watched Richard's face cycle through emotions, anger, grief, resignation. Finally, he nodded. I need to review this with my attorney more thoroughly, Bradford said. Can we have until tomorrow morning? You have until Wednesday at 5 p.m., Diana said. Not a minute longer. If we don't have a signed agreement by then, we file everything we have. We left the conference room. I didn't look back at Richard, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing any emotion on my face. It wasn't until Diana and I were in the elevator heading down that I let myself breathe. You think he'll sign? I asked. Yes. Bradford's smart enough to know that fighting this would be suicide. Richard's done, he just hasn't fully accepted it yet. That night, I sat in the house that was now definitely mine, drinking wine and trying to process everything that had happened. My phone rang around 9:01 p.m. Marcus. Mom, Dad just called me. What did he say? He was crying, actual tears. Said he'd made terrible mistakes, that he never meant to hurt anyone, that he loved me and Isabel and he hoped we could forgive him someday. What did you tell him? I told him I needed time to process everything, that I couldn't just pretend the past few weeks hadn't happened. He paused. He said you were destroying him, that you'd turned into someone he didn't recognize. I felt anger spike hot in my chest. He's still trying to make himself the victim. I know. Don't worry, Mom. I'm not buying it. Isabel isn't either. She called me after he called her with the same speech. We're not stupid. We know who did what here. Thank you for telling me. Are you doing okay? Really? I'm surviving. Some days that feels like enough. It's more than enough. You're the strongest person I know. After we hung up, I thought about Richard crying to our children, still trying to manipulate, still trying to control how people saw him. Some people never learned. Wednesday, at 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes before Diana's deadline, Bradford Mills sent over the signed settlement agreement. Every term accepted, every condition agreed to. Richard had folded completely. Diana called me immediately. It's done. He signed everything. The divorce will be finalized in 60 days pending the standard waiting period, but legally, you're protected. The money is secured. He's agreed to resign from Wellington by the end of next week. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. 28 years of marriage ended with a signature on a legal document. A relationship I'd thought was solid revealed to be a performance. A man I'd loved shown to be someone capable of cruelty I never imagined. Thank you, Diana, for everything. You did the hard part, Evelyn. You were strong enough to protect yourself. I just provided the legal framework. That weekend, Marcus and Isabel came over for dinner. I made lasagna, one of their childhood favorites. We sat around the kitchen table together, and for a little while, it almost felt normal. Until Isabel asked the question I'd been dreading. Mom, did you ever suspect, before you found the messages? I thought about it carefully. There were small things that didn't quite fit, but I trusted your father. I thought we had the kind of marriage where we were honest with each other. I was wrong. He really messed up, Marcus said quietly. I keep thinking about all the times he gave me advice about integrity and character, about doing the right thing even when it's hard. Turns out he couldn't even follow his own advice. People are complicated, I said. Your father isn't a monster. He's a flawed human being who made terrible choices and hurt people he claimed to love. You're allowed to be angry with him and still love him. Those feelings can coexist. Do you still love him? Isabel asked softly. I considered the question. I love the man I thought he was, the man he pretended to be for 28 years. That man doesn't exist. The real Richard Whitmore? No. I don't love him. I don't even know if I ever really knew him. 2 days later, Wellington Fund Management announced that Richard Whitmore was stepping down from his position as senior fund manager to pursue other opportunities and spend more time focusing on personal priorities. The press release was bland and corporate. No one outside our immediate circle knew the real reason. Richard got to keep his dignity, at least publicly. Privately was another story. James Chen sent me his final report showing that Sienna Calloway had broken things off with Richard immediately after learning about the investigation. She'd apparently told him she couldn't be involved with someone whose career was imploding. Love, it seemed, was only real when backed by money and status. Richard tried calling me once more, about a week after signing the settlement. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. What do you want, Richard? I wanted you to know I'm sorry. For all of it. For what I did, for how I treated you, for the things I said. You deserved so much better. Yes, I did. I know you probably won't believe this, but I did love you. At least at the beginning. Maybe I still do, in some way. I lost myself somewhere along the way. Started believing I deserved things I hadn't earned. Started resenting you for being strong when I felt weak. That's not an excuse. I know, it's not. It's just the truth. I was quiet for a moment, trying to figure out if I wanted to say what I was thinking. Finally, I decided he'd earned at least this much honesty. You want to know what hurts the most, Richard? It's not the affair. It's not even the money. It's that you mocked me. You took intimate moments from our marriage and turned them into jokes for her entertainment. You made me feel pathetic for trying to look nice for you, for wanting to keep our marriage alive. That's the part I can't forgive. Not the betrayal, but the cruelty of it. He was silent for so long I thought he'd hung up. Then I heard him crying. I'm so sorry, Evelyn. I'm so sorry. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix what you broke. Goodbye, Richard. I hung up and blocked his number permanently this time. There was nothing left to say. No words that would repair the damage, no apology that would make the hurt disappear. But I was still here. Still standing, still moving forward. Richard had tried to destroy me, and instead, he'd destroyed himself. That wasn't my doing. That was just karma, efficient and precise. Diana invited me to lunch the following Tuesday. Our regular schedule resumed. We sat on her terrace with wine and expensive salads, the city sprawling below us. You did it, she said, raising her glass. You survived what would have destroyed most people. You protected yourself, held your ground, and came out stronger. I don't feel stronger. I feel exhausted. That's what strength feels like sometimes. The exhaustion of holding yourself together through a crisis. But Evelyn, look at what you accomplished. You went from discovering the worst betrayal imaginable to securing your entire future in less than 3 weeks. Most people would still be sobbing in bed. I did some of that too, when no one was looking. Good. You're allowed to grieve, but you didn't let grief stop you from protecting yourself. That's the difference between surviving and thriving. I thought about that. About the woman I'd been 3 weeks ago who believed her marriage was solid. About the woman I was now, legally separated, financially secured, fundamentally changed by the experience of being betrayed by someone I trusted completely. What do I do now? I asked. Whatever you want. That's the beauty of it. You're 57 years old, financially independent, free from a marriage that was killing you slowly without you even knowing it. The world is wide open, Evelyn. You just have to decide what you want from it. What did I want? For the first time in nearly 30 years, I didn't have to consider anyone else's needs or desires, just my own. The freedom of that was both thrilling and terrifying. I think I want to travel, I said slowly. Maybe take that Italy trip I'd planned to do with Richard, but alone, or with friends, on my terms. Sounds perfect. And I want to help other women, use my experience, my financial expertise, to help women who are facing what I faced. So they don't feel as lost as I did in the beginning. Diana smiled. Now that's the Evelyn Whitmore I know, turning pain into purpose. I have several clients who could use exactly that kind of support. We finished lunch talking about possibilities instead of problems, about futures instead of past betrayals. And for the first time since that horrible night when my phone lit up at 3 a.m., I felt something that might have been hope. 3 months later, I stood in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, staring at Botticelli's Birth of Venus. The gallery was surprisingly quiet for a Tuesday afternoon in October, just a handful of tourists scattered through the rooms. I'd come to Italy alone, exactly as I'd planned. 2 weeks traveling through Tuscany and Rome, staying in small hotels, eating at restaurants I chose on a whim, answering to no one but myself. It was glorious. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Marcus with a photo of him and his girlfriend at some restaurant in Boston. "Thinking of you, Mom. Hope Florence is amazing." I smiled and sent back a heart emoji. The kids had been incredible through everything. Supportive without being suffocating, angry at their father without making me feel guilty for destroying their family. Because I hadn't destroyed anything. Richard had done that himself. I thought about him sometimes, though less and less as weeks passed. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he was living in a modest apartment in Stamford, doing freelance consulting work for smaller firms. The non-compete agreement meant he couldn't work at any major fund management company, which had essentially cut his earning potential by 70%. He was fine, financially speaking. Still wealthy by normal standards, but nothing like the life he'd had before. Sienna Calloway had apparently moved back to Chicago shortly after everything fell apart. Her LinkedIn profile showed she'd taken a job at a much smaller marketing firm, a significant step down from Davidson Corp. I wondered if she ever thought about what that affair had cost her. Probably not. People like that rarely took responsibility for their choices. The divorce had been finalized 6 weeks ago. I'd attended the final hearing with Diana, signed the papers, and walked out of that courthouse feeling lighter than I had in years. Not happy, exactly, but free, unencumbered, ready to start the next chapter without the weight of betrayal dragging me down. The financial settlement had been executed exactly as agreed. $2 million transferred into my account from Richard's holdings. All funds he'd spent on Sienna repaid to Wellington's corporate accounts before his resignation. My personal portfolio of $8.7 million remained entirely mine, untouched and secured. The house in Greenwich was mine alone now, though I was considering selling it. Too many memories, too many ghosts in those rooms. I'd started the consulting service I'd mentioned to Diana. Whitmore Financial Protection Services, specializing in helping women protect their assets during divorces or separations. Diana had referred 3 clients to me already, and word was spreading. Apparently, there were a lot of women out there who needed exactly the kind of strategic financial planning I could provide. Women who were facing the same situation I'd faced, who needed someone who understood both the financial mechanics and the emotional devastation. Helping them helped me. Turned my pain into something productive, something that mattered. I moved away from the Botticelli painting and wandered through other galleries, taking my time, absorbing the art and the history and the beauty of a place I'd never expected to see alone. Richard and I had planned this trip together years ago, talked about spending our retirement traveling through Europe, visiting museums and vineyards and ancient cities. That version of the future had died the night he sent me that screenshot. But a different future had emerged from the ruins, and I was discovering I liked this version better. It was mine, entirely mine. That evening, I had dinner at a small trattoria near my hotel. Pasta with truffle sauce, a glass of Chianti, tiramisu for dessert. The waiter was friendly and charming, complimented my Italian even though it was terrible, and I left feeling satisfied and content. Walked back to my hotel through streets lit by warm golden lamplight, past couples holding hands and families laughing together, past street musicians playing violins in the piazzas. I didn't feel lonely. I felt present, alive. Myself in a way I hadn't been in years. Back in my hotel room, I video called Isabel. She answered from her apartment in Chicago, her face filling the screen. "Mom, how's Italy?" "Beautiful. Overwhelming, exactly what I needed." "You look good, really good. Like, happy." "I think I might be. Is that weird?" "Not even a little bit. You deserve to be happy. After everything Dad put you through, you deserve every good thing." We talked for 20 minutes about her work, her friends, the new apartment she was thinking about moving into. Normal daughter-mother conversation. No mention of Richard. No rehashing of the divorce. Just life moving forward. "Have you talked to Dad recently?" she finally asked. "No, nothing since that last phone call months ago. He asks about you sometimes. When I talk to him, what does he ask? How you're doing, if you're okay, if you hate him." She paused. I tell him you're doing great. I don't tell him whether you hate him or not. I don't hate him, I said, and realized it was true. Hating him would give him power over my emotions. I just don't think about him much anymore. He's part of my past, not my present. That's probably healthier than hating him. Probably. How is he doing? Lonely, I think. The apartment he's in is depressing. His work isn't fulfilling. He made his choices, and now he's living with them. Good. Not good that he's miserable, but good that he's facing consequences. Actions should have consequences. After we hung up, I sat on the hotel balcony with a glass of wine, looking out at the Florence skyline. The Duomo was lit up in the distance, magnificent and eternal. I thought about consequences and choices and the strange paths life took. If Richard hadn't accidentally sent me that screenshot, where would I be now? Still living in ignorant contentment while he drained our accounts and planned his escape. Eventually blindsided by divorce papers and a husband who'd made himself financially untouchable? I'd probably have survived that too, but it would have been so much harder, so much more devastating. His mistake had saved me. Given me time to protect myself. Given me the evidence I needed to fight back. In a weird way, that accidental text message was the best thing that could have happened. Not the betrayal itself, that still hurt when I let myself think about it too deeply. But the discovery of it before he could complete his plan? That was a gift, however unwanted. I finished my wine and went back inside. Tomorrow I was taking a day trip to Siena. The day after that, San Gimignano. I had a whole itinerary planned, all the places I'd wanted to see, all the experiences I'd dreamed about. And I was doing it alone, on my own terms, with my own money that no one could take from me. The future I'd imagined with Richard was gone. But the future I was building for myself, that was still being written. And I was discovering I was a much better author of my own story than I'd ever been as a supporting character in someone else's. 2 weeks later, I flew back to Connecticut. Marcus picked me up from the airport, gave me a huge hug, loaded my luggage into his car. "Welcome home, Mom. How was the trip?" "Perfect. Exactly what I needed." We drove back to Greenwich, talking about Italy and his work and Isabel's new apartment. When we pulled up to the house, I looked at it differently than I had before. Not as a monument to a failed marriage, but as a home that had been mine all along. Richard had lived here, but I'd made it a home. That was still true, even with him gone. "You thinking about selling?" Marcus asked, following my gaze. "Maybe. I haven't decided yet. Part of me wants a fresh start somewhere new, but another part of me doesn't want to let him take this from me too. Whatever you decide, we support you." Inside, the house was exactly as I'd left it, clean, quiet, waiting. I walked through the rooms, touching familiar objects, and felt something settle inside me. Peace, maybe, or just acceptance of everything that had happened and everything that was coming next. My phone rang. Diana. "Welcome back. How was Florence?" "Incredible. Thank you for pushing me to go. You needed it. Listen, I have 2 new client referrals for you, both women in situations very similar to what you went through. Think you're ready to take them on?" "Absolutely. Send me their information." "Will do. And Evelyn, I'm proud of you. You took the worst thing that could have happened and turned it into strength. Not everyone can do that." "I had a good teacher." "Damn right you did." After we hung up, I made myself tea and sat on the back terrace, watching the late afternoon sun filter through the trees. Somewhere in Stamford, Richard was probably in his small apartment, living with his regrets and his reduced circumstances. Somewhere in Chicago, Sienna was rebuilding a career she'd damaged for a relationship that was never real. And here I was, in the home I'd fought to keep, stronger and wiser and more myself than I'd been in decades. Richard had tried to destroy me. Instead, he'd freed me, had forced me to remember who I was underneath all the years of being someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's partner. I was Evelyn Whitmore, financial strategist, survivor, woman who'd rebuilt herself from betrayal into something fiercer and more authentic. And I was just getting started.